guys, we're going to have to think of a new song, you know. No pressure. But welcome, everyone. Welcome to those who threw everything they had at the last election and are still hurting. Welcome to all of those who are still hopeful. Welcome to those who just want to hide away. And welcome to those who've had enough of mourning and want to get out there and organise. Thank you for coming tonight. Together, we are the Labour Party. Together, we are the greatest force for social change this country has ever known. And together, we will unite, we will rebuild, and we will win. Now, it's more than 30 years ago that as a young girl I first came here to the Science and Industry Museum, and I remember wandering down into the old Victorian sewer and learning about the thousands of lives that the great civil engineering project saved from cholera. And going from room to room was like travelling forward in time, from 18th century cotton spinning to the Victorian steam engines to the birth of flight, the first computer and space travel. It was like the history of human progress, and it only went in one direction, forwards and upwards. And I remember feeling really proud that it happened here in the city where I was from. I remember being amazed how far we'd come in just a few generations and trying to imagine what the future was going to look like if it carried on at the same rate. You'd turn on the TV and watch Tomorrow's World and it'd show you amazing things. And you couldn't wait for tomorrow, you wanted it today. And it wasn't just about the technology either. The history of Salford and Manchester was about the Chartists, the trade unions, the Pankhursts. The history of our cities was the history of struggle, of solidarity, of social and economic progress on an unstoppable journey upwards. But now I think these days, that sort of optimism is in short supply. And there's an old joke that nostalgia isn't what it used to be. And I think you can say the same about the future, sadly. The climate and environmental crisis, the rise of the far right to political power, and the relentless pressure that austerity places on our public services and on our social fabric. These are undoubtedly forces that darken our lives and darken our horizons. But the thing is, if you've ever known and believed in progress, you can't ever unknow it. You might be fearful, you might be defeated once or twice, but you always expect to win in the end. Now, yes, millions of people have taken a knock to their quality of life from deindustrialisation and a decade of austerity, but I do not think that has dented one bit of our shining conviction that our children's lives must always be better than our own. Yes, our high streets are struggling, but we still think of them with pride. And I understand the pride that millions feel in the place that they call home, whether it's symbolised by the Manchester bee, the liver bird or the Welsh dragon. And you know what? We demand a future for our towns and cities that's worthy of their great past. And I will fight for that future. I will fight for a Green New Deal that ushers in a new era of prosperity, security and well-being. I will fight for the investment in the low-carbon industries of today and tomorrow to secure a livable planet for future generations and bring new jobs and prosperity to all regions and countries of the United Kingdom. I will fight for world-class public services that secure our fundamental needs and free us up as individuals, as families, as communities to pursue the lives we aspire to. I will fight for the rewilding and restoration of our landscapes, which will multiply many times over the natural wealth that belongs to us all. And I will fight for a democratic economy, for modern democratic public ownership, so that we all share in the tremendous wealth that human ingenuity and hard work can guarantee us all. I will fight for all of these things. I will fight for all of these things. And that is why I am standing to become the leader of the Labour Party and the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Now, that's a long way from where I came from, I'll be honest. If someone had told me 30 years ago that when I first came here that I'd be back in 2020 standing on a podium telling you all that I was going to be the leader of the party and the next Prime Minister, I'd have thought they'd stumbled out of the hacienda having taken some copious substances. You see, I grew up in a working class family in Old Trafford, nearly 2 miles down the road, and I learnt my politics sitting at the top of our stairs, listening to my dad talk about pay disputes, the union and redundancies. I learnt my politics working in a pawn shop, that's P-A-W-N, by the way. And that was after 18 years of Tory rule, and my God, you could see what it really means when the government washes its hands of its people, when it talks about living within our means, and rather than invest, loads debt onto the backs of the poorest. I also learnt my politics in May 1997, when just walking down the street you could literally see people with a spring in their step, with hope for the future again. But when I studied politics at Manchester Met, it wasn't like getting an instruction manual for winning power and changing the world. Studying politics was learning about something distant, something that had always been there, and something that was not about to change anytime soon. I might as well have been studying the Himalayas or the Milky Way for all it had to do with me and my life. And that's why I never expected to be here. Because where I grew up, Westminster seemed a million miles away from me. The story of the last few years is that many people instinctively feel there is something wrong with their laws being drafted hundreds of miles away by a distant and largely unaccountable bureaucratic elite in Brussels. But I'll be honest, Westminster didn't feel much closer, and it still doesn't today. And that's why I want to shake up the way government works and deliver a clear message to voters. We will put power back where it belongs, in your hands. So, for starters, I want to sweep away the House of Lords. The only unelected second chamber in the whole of Europe, and I want to replace it with a new elected Senate based outside of London. Salford, exactly. Well, we might have to have a bit of a consultation, but I'll put a good word in for Salford, don't worry. I can't be seen to be biased, can I? But we will end the gentleman's club of politics, and we will be setting out plans to go further by devolving power out of Westminster to a regional or local level. An elected Senate would have a new democratic legitimacy and should have new powers to reflect that. In my view, this should include holding the government to account on the impact of new legislation on our wealth, our well-being and our environment. Now, we've got a motto in Salford: the welfare of the people is the highest law. And I want the Labour Party to say that under a Labour government, the role of government will be the safety and betterment of its people. And of course, we should look at new ways to make our Senate more representative with proportional voting systems for elections. And it's not just enough to expect democracy in our politics. We need democracy in our economy too. Again, if I look at my life, yes, I worked hard. I studied to become a solicitor part-time whilst holding down a full-time job. As a working class woman, I often felt I had to work twice as hard as some of my colleagues to be taken seriously, and if I'm honest, I still feel that today. And yes, I did go on to do very well, but a lot of people around me did not. And they worked just as hard, were no less capable. And of course, we all like to look back on our lives and attribute our success to some unique personal attribute. And that is true to some extent. But again, if we're honest, in our economy, a lot of it is down to luck. Luck of birth, a lucky break at work, a gamble that pays off. And that is a terrible waste, because for everyone who gets lucky, there's a handful of others whose talent is untapped and whose hard work is unrewarded. And just think of what we could be, think of how we could live if we unleashed everything that we're truly capable of. My kind of socialism is the kind in which we all rise together. My kind of socialism is a Britain in which everyone is free to dream, free to climb, and free to succeed. And I'm not talking about social mobility for a lucky few. I'm talking about a society in which structural inequality and financial insecurity are gone. And that means expanding alternative models of ownership and collective bargaining rights in our economy. That means fighting racism and xenophobia. That means fighting for LGBTQ+ rights and gender equality. And it means rebalancing our economy so every town, city and region can thrive again with renewed pride rooted in solidarity, inclusivity and internationalism. But of course, none of this will happen without a Labour government. And I know many of you are still hurting from the devastating loss before Christmas. And the truth is, many didn't trust us, whether it was Brexit, whether it was tackling anti-Semitism. They didn't believe in us enough. And we've got a lot of work to do to rebuild trust with the British public, because it's no good promising the world if people don't trust you with the basics. To win, the Labour Party does need a new professionalism. It needs a strong presence as a force for good in those communities we need to win back, not in 5 years, but today and tomorrow. We need to look like a government in waiting. But we can't win by throwing away the very things that give power a purpose. The fight for a livable climate, for workers' rights, for democratic ownership. These struggles are ultimately indivisible. We cannot sacrifice one in pursuit of another and expect to succeed. So we must unite, we must rebuild, and when we win for all of us. That's the Labour Party I believe in. And that is our path to power. Thank you, everyone.